First, Kurt, thank you very much. I appreciate both the opportunity and the work it takes to set something like this up uh, to get a bunch of busy people together, even when it's an important topic to talk about. And thank you. It's a pleasure working with you. Uh, Let me introduce myself. My name is Jim Butler. I am one of the few people in the country who describes myself as a hotel lawyer. I went to the University of California, Berkeley undergraduate and Berkeley Law School in the 1960s when free speech, dirty speech, People's Park and all that was going on. But of course, I've always been a kind of a contra, and I was the guy in the Air Force ROTC with the butch haircut, while Mario Savio had the shoulder length hair sitting on Sproul Hall steps. The first 15 years of my career were spent kind of on a fast track of big financial transactions, acquisitions, financings. I became the head of a corporate department and one of the youngest partners in the second largest law firm in the United States. And then in 1982, I left that giant New York-based law firm to become the B in JMBM, Jeffer, Mangels, Butler, and Mitchell. The first 15 years of my practice were real estate, corporate securities, banking, acquisitions. And then around 1985, all of a sudden real estate started going into the toilet. And I went from a corporate guy to somebody working for the FDIC, the FSLIC, Federal Savings and Loan Insurance Corporation, the RTC, the Security Pacific National Bank, Crocker, First Interstate, Bank of America, IBJ, LPCB, Fuji, and many, many others, representing lenders in some huge workouts, most of them involving hotels or hospitality, because they found that although they had great law firms for most things, they didn't really know hospitality. And we were working on multi-$100 million loans in the 1980s when that was really a lot of money, and when there maybe was another 100 or 200 million on top of that in a second or a third or a fourth position on 800 million of financing. So basically, starting in the mid 80s, I got into workouts and bankruptcies and receiverships and had 10 years of that and really got into hospitality to the point that I was no longer a corporate lawyer who did hotels or a real estate lawyer who had done a hotel deal. That's all I did, and came to really appreciate how you need to get people with experience. And that's one of the pleasures of working with people like Jack and folks like you. We have the hotel experience, more than 30 years, more than $87 billion of hotels, 3,900 hotels, more than 2,100 HMAs and franchise agreements, more than 2,000 hotel bankruptcies, receiverships, and workouts. And we really live, love, and know the norms and customs and players and practices of the hotel industry. That's why we put together the Global Hospitality Alliance. And with that, I'm going to try to share my screen if I'm able to do that. The Global Hospitality Alliance is really designed and provides both the legal hotel experience with JMBM. All of our people are lawyers or support staff, and the hotel consulting and advisory side that really comes from Jack's group with Manhattan Hospitality. So with that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Jack. We're going to look today at what comes after that initial loan forbearance. You've probably all given people 90 days, maybe some kind of forbearance or whatever. But what are you going to do now? And what it's time for a reality check as to what you should be doing. So Jack, why don't you take it over and tell us a little bit about the situation and the kinds of things that asset managers ought to be looking at to evaluate their assets and their options.
I am Jack Westergaard, Managing Director, Manhattan Hospitality Advisors, I've been in the hospitality business for about 25 years, excuse me, 40 years. Manhattan Hospitality Advisors has been around for 25 years. And during that time, we've worked on hundreds of assets as an asset manager, advisor, project manager, workout specialist, and receiver. And hopefully this program we put together today will be informative and helpful for you folks. It's about pre-workout analysis, getting it right first time, because sometimes you can't go backwards once you've gone in a certain direction and making decisions on a workout. This is one of my favorite slides. It basically talks about the fact that COVID-19 has infected the hospitality world, and that, as this slide shows, what happened from March of 2020 on, the steepest occupancy decline ever in the history of the hotel business, and average rates fell off 50 or 60%. Also at this time, approximately 20% of the hotels actually closed because there wasn't enough business to keep them open. As I've said, this slide speaks for itself. The hospitality industry fell off the cliff. 2019 was the end of a 10-year run after the last Great Recession, mostly upside in the hospitality industry. Great value was regained. Hotel occupancy at all-time high. Hotel average rates in industry all-time high. But there were danger signals for the last 2 years, as both occupancy and rate increases were pretty much flat. 2020, remember, we had 2 good months, January and February, added to the 10 miserable months that we're experiencing now and will by the end of the year. Occupancy will drop to approximately 40%. The average room rate on a national basis will drop about $26 or over 20%. If you put them together, it's a 52.5% drop in RevPAR. Some critical thoughts on what's happened over this time. In April, the week of April 11th, RevPAR as an industry dropped 83.6%. And if that number doesn't shock everybody, I don't know what will. However, as everybody struggled, everybody pulled out their workout kit, everybody got refocused again on what are we going to do to beat this pandemic. There were gradual increases in occupancy, which actually took place all the way through April 22nd. And then on the week after April 22nd was the first week there was actually a decline from April 11th. Demand, however, will probably continue to fall in September and October as fewer people take vacations. Key demand segment to watch for everybody is corporate travel. We're all hoping that corporate travel comes back now that we're past Labor Day. I'm not counting on it. But big group conventions, international tourism still remain largely non-existent, and the industry will not be able to fully recover until those travel activities return to normal. The performance of hotels has varied based on the segment of the market in which they operate during 2020. Large downtown hotels with ballrooms have performed the worst. Airport hotels have performed the second worst. Limited service hotels around driving destinations, national parks, and extended stay hotels have actually performed better than most of the other hotels in the industry. According to this chart, which is CBRE and Calibri Labs, most recent forecast, it'll probably take till the third quarter of 2023 or into the first quarter of 2024 before we regain lost occupancy rate and RevPAR from 2019. Shocking numbers, but you're all aware of it because you're living it every day as special services. Sort of additional recap, during the past 6 months, hotels have used their reserve funds and PPP money to pay their expenses. I can tell you for a fact that a lot of the hotel owners didn't use that PPP money to pay for employees, which it was earmarked for, but have used it to pay for other expenses because they had no income. In many instances, those funds will be gone by the year's end without the ability to pay debt service or property tax. Reserve funds have also been tapped into as lenders have told them to go ahead and use the reserve fund to pay for debt service and other types of bills and expenses. Special servicers, you all on this call, are now faced with the task of critical care medical staff are performing triage, trying to ascertain which assets can survive and which ones help will not help. The pre-workout analysis that we subscribe to can help with that process. It can help in protecting value, creating value, assisting in determining which bucket hotels belong. Jim and I have talked a long time about 3 buckets. We think there are 3 distinct buckets all hotels go into today. Hotels that are in pre-COVID-19 era were struggling and were very marginal to begin with. Hotels that were performing substantially below optimum potential before the pandemic, and which could be more successful with a change in ownership, brand, or an operating partner. In the bucket 3, hotels that were doing well before the pandemic and have significant upside. The hotels in the first bucket will probably cease operating as hotels, will take too long to recover for additional investment to be financially sound decision, or may be destined for alternative uses like nursing homes. I can tell you I've heard a tremendous buzz in the industry today about a lot of the limited service hotels and budget hotels that were struggling for years are now considering flipping over to nursing homes or low-income housing, as cities are striving for both of those. The hotels in the second and third bucket deserve prompt attention and a recovery action plan. The PWA, the pre-workout analysis, can assist you in securing vital information in deciding which bucket your hotels are placed in, including red flag areas on legal documents, historical and operational and potential upside for today and tomorrow. The PWA must go beyond cold cash flows, and STR reports, which quite honestly is what a lot of lenders look at today. They pull out a cash flow analysis, they look at an STR report, they take a look at a financial statement, and they're hoping that they get enough information out of those 2 or 3 things to decide which bucket that hotel can go into. I can tell you that doing just that won't get you to where you want to be, won't make you smart enough and knowledgeable enough to make that decision. It provides, our PWA provides objective analysis of a hotel in a context of its current pandemic-stricken market, assessment of sponsorship, branding, operator effectiveness, capital expense requirements, staffing guide analysis, security issues regarding loss of data or revenue. Your review should include, and the data I'm going to go through now on the next few slides is actually the data we do on due diligence when someone's buying a hotel, and we've done about $3 billion worth of diligence over the years. It's also the same process that hotels actually work their way through when creating new budgets. And guess what you have coming up in the next few months? Budgets for all of the hotels in the US that are due out somewhere between the 1st of November and the 15th of December. They look at STR year-end, monthly, weekly reports, but for 3 years, looking at trends. Review of year-end P&L for 3 years, because 1 year really doesn't tell the real story. Review of the latest budget and projections, competitive set tour in person or virtual tour. I've already taken a couple virtual tours on behalf of clients, getting the hotel engineer to use FaceTime. When we can't get to a place, there's a way to do it electronically today, where you can actually walk into the boiler room, you can actually walk in and take a look at the chiller, you can actually walk in and look at guest rooms. But I always recommend doing it with the engineer, usually the most honest person in the hotel, and give you the real truth, the real story of what's happened. competitive set tour in person or virtual tour, a property tour in person, looking at all aspects of space, mechanical rooms, telephone switch room, grounds, parking lot, roof, and again, all with the chief engineer. Review of past 3-year capital spend, review of last renovation budget, a PIP review with estimated capital spend requirements, review of engineering, building inspection, and violation logs for 3 years. What you get out of looking at all of these information that doesn't show up on looking at a Smith travel report, doesn't show up on a report from the general manager. And there's some really key information here about whether they kept up their operating equipment, whether they're actually functioning as a good functioning hotel ought to be. Review of engineering and preventive maintenance schedule and log, assuming there is one. You'll be surprised at how many hotels don't have it. Identify capital needs and prepare a summary capital budget. Review security staffing, incidental logs. Interview EOC team in person or virtual. I cannot tell you how important this is. What we love to do is interview each of the EOC executive operating team members, the general manager, the assistant general manager, the food and beverage director, director of marketing, revenue manager, the chief engineer. And what we get out of those people is an actual and real assessment of what they believe is actually going on at the hotel. And what I always ask each one of them is, if you own this hotel tomorrow, what would you do different? What would you recommend doing different to make it better? And almost always we get 1 or 2 nuggets of information out of that that actually help us to determine which direction the hotel ought to go and what things ought to be done in order to make it profitable. We review staffing guides for housekeeping, food and beverage, and front office. We review any operational department staffing and productivity reports. Most good operators will have productivity reports that compare exactly what the hotel has done on a weekly or monthly basis based on the annual staffing guides put together in the budget. They make recommendations. We make recommendations for staffing adjustments and do that all the time. In past downturns, we've actually gone and made recommendations for staffing changes on behalf of lenders or special servicers, or as we were a receiver, reducing payroll at some resorts or hotels by $3 to $4 million. I can tell you that's pure profit. We review revenue and cost metrics as compared to similar hotels for prior year. Review COVID-19 staffing models because they're different now than they were in January and February rather of this year, and we make recommendations. We review the balance sheet, which really tells you a lot and a good history of what's going on. We review latest 90-day cash flow projections and projections for at least 12 months. In COVID-19 time, it probably ought to be 18 more months in the future to see exactly what kind of cash needs you're going to need. And from a lender perspective, a special servicer perspective, exactly how much cash might be needed and whether the owner actually has deep enough pockets to fund that. We review the business mix model and make recommendations. In over 50% of the hotels that we actually look at, we find that a simple adjustment of the business model mix will actually make a great change to the financial viability of the hotel, even in today's COVID-19 business. I have an old theory because I'm an older guy and been through almost 40 years in the business, that there is a hotel market segment for every hotel. You just have to data mine for it to find it. It might not be your most ideal market mix, but I can tell you that it will be a market mix that will generate revenue, cash flow, and hopefully allow you to pay it at the very least, pay your debt service and pay your bills at the end of the month. We review past 2 years of Revenate report. Jim and I had a chuckle over this the other day. Revenate's been around for about 4 years. It is not the reInvent report. It is a report that you pay for and subscribe to. It's about $150 a month. Good hotels get it. And what it does is it searches the internet for data on what your guests at all of the websites are saying about your hotel based on your rates, based on your service. And again, it's a thing that the hotel can't lie to you about. It's actually a good source and metric for finding information about how good the service has been at your hotel. Looking at a couple of years of that will give you an idea of whether the management company has done the right job, or at the very least, whether there have been physical problems with the hotel that can be fixed by capital improvement. If I haven't put you to sleep yet, please forgive me going through this list, but it is an expansive list that will actually give you on a printout, but it's extensive and it covers everything from vendor contracts, trying to go back and rebid out all your vendor contracts to reduce costs, identify alternative cost-saving opportunities for the assets from all aspects, review property leases. I can't tell you how many times we've gone in and found that the owner hasn't increased property leases on the property, and they've just been a rollover, even though it hasn't been in the lease, and haven't picked up the incremental money. A little tough to do today, but nevertheless, it's something that needs to be looked at. All of the sales and marketing, digital marketing, social media plans, catering and booking paces, supply and demand changes, what's going in, what's going out, how it's impacted the business, the business model mix, channels of distribution. We make recommendations. It's a long, extensive process, but it's one that needs to take place. We review what do you get for data mining and reading all of it. The brand marketing plan for 2 years, brand contribution for group business, establish opportunities for improved contribution. Don't believe that because an operator has a brand, they've tapped into all of the business that brand could possibly give them. Q&A reports, which are quality assurance reports, another soft report that'll give you an idea of whether they're adhering to brand standards and the feedback they're getting from the inspector. And an overall assessment of the brand for that asset. Is it good for the market? Is it good for that hotel? And what are alternatives if they're applicable? Make an overall assessment of the operator, make recommendations, create an independent 5-year pro forma, which today is going to be a really tough job, determine ultimately which bucket this asset belongs to. What do you gain by doing all this? Clues to how good each executive committee member is, clues to how effective the operator has managed the asset, clues to how good the brand is, clues to how effectively the operator took advantage of the brand, opportunities for revenue enhancement, opportunities for cost containment. I picked a couple interesting ones. I think Kevin might actually know one of the ones from past life. These were 2 mid-market hotels in Texas. Interesting. They were both owned by 2 brothers, a family. They had minimal hotel experience. The family decided to manage them themselves, didn't hire a professional management company. The management team also had very limited management experience, and they were actually pulled in from other businesses that the 2 brothers owned. The GM was formerly the front desk clerk. No sales associates existed, so there was no sales effort and no group sales. There was no organized accounting, only checkbook. There was no AR and AP, and when we went through and created one, we found out they were months behind. And of course, everybody knows that AP is accounts payable, what you need to pay your vendors, and AR is accounts receivable, how much money they had outstanding that they just never bothered to collect. And these 2 particular assets, I think there were hundreds of thousands of dollars of AR that they had just not had the common sense to go and collect. Their balance sheet didn't sync with the P&L. They couldn't forecast past 30 days. We kept asking them for a 90-day forecast. They couldn't give it to us, didn't understand what we wanted. They relied 100% on the brand business, and Jack's theory of 40 years in the business that you get, if you really have a good brand, it's right business, right brand for your hotel, that you're going to get about 40 to 45% of your business from that brand. The other 50 to 55% of the business actually comes from property-specific marketing, and those folks being able to tap into group sales, being able to tap into digital marketing and so forth. There was tremendous amount of deferred maintenance. The hotel underwent a renovation, but didn't meet the PIP or brand standards, and then lied about the extent of the renovation and told the lender that they had satisfied the PIP. When we walked around, we actually found that there's no way they could have spent the money on the renovation that they said they did. I believe the gentleman's wife went out and bought furniture at Home Depot, at all types of discount stores, and none of it matched. So they actually had carpet cubes in some of the guest rooms and so forth. But it was just a horrible renovation that didn't meet anybody's standards, including the guests. There was no capital plan for working on any deferred maintenance. They had QA issues, basically said the hotel was poorly run. Inventories hadn't been taken in a year. And when we started to walk through and look at them, we could tell that instead of having a par stock of 4 for linen and for terry, which was the towels you use, they had a par stock of 1, so they were constantly in laundry doing linen every day, burning up payroll. They had an untrustworthy borrower, undercapitalized borrower, and a decent brand. And I would put this one into bucket number 2. Sure. Bear with me, I'm going to give you one more. Kevin, you might, I think, remember this one. This was a Wall Street owner. I won't go into which special server it was in, but I think it was another life that Kevin had. Anyway, it was a Hawaiian resort. It was owned by a mainland Wall Street fund that never came over to the property. They had no idea what was going on. They bought it as a quote for a few cents on a dollar and thought it was a great investment. They had a weak local soft branded operator who was doing an absolute miserable job. They had no group salespeople, so there were no groups. The majority of their business was cheap wholesale business. And for those of you who aren't aware, wholesale business is business that airlines in Hawaii control 50, did pre-pan COVID-19, controlled about 50% of the airline seats. They just bought cheap business from them, and it dramatically impacted both the occupancy and the average rate on the hotel. The P&L once again had no balance sheet. There were all kinds of challenges on the P&L. We found that the operator was billing them for approximately $200,000 in unsubstantiated yearly billbacks. While it might not seem a lot of money, it probably was a month of debt service covered. They had issues with forecasting for 30 days, weekly, 30 days, 60, 90 days, and just done a horrible job. An annual budget had no business plan. They had no capital plan. The operator couldn't generate cash flow reports. They had huge deferred maintenance issues. And in fact, the roof leaked everywhere and the water had damaged the carpet and drywall in 8 or 9 guest rooms. So they hadn't sold them for over a year. When I plugged in my computer on my property tour, carpet under my desk was wet. I see Jim chuckling because I should say it was a shocking experience because I almost got electrocuted and did get shocked out of it, and they had no clue. And they said, "Oh, we put you in a room that our guests, we're not renting the regular guests now." There was, suffice to say, mold throughout the hotel. They had an outdoor luau pavilion that generated over $3 million of revenue from a cruise line that actually stopped in, and I think Mondays and Thursdays. They did about 300 covers at luau. Again, $3 million of revenue. There was a fire. The luau pavilion had been destroyed. They went ahead and collected the insurance money, but hadn't repaired it, put police tape around it, and any guest could have literally just walked in and gotten injured. There was severe risk throughout the property. The GM was never at the property. as he ran 2 hotels and spent less than 50% of his time at this particular hotel. The horrible guest review, they had horrible guest reviews. Bottom line, they needed a new brand, a new operator, and a new owner. And in my opinion, this was somewhere between bucket 1 and bucket 2. But it was a hotel that really wasn't cutting it. And you couldn't get the type of information that we did out of doing a quick cursory review of Smith Travel Report or an annual budget. Lastly, I want to point out that it's budget season again. There's a reality check coming for every property, every hotel in America. Per the HMA, these budgets are due anywhere between 30 and 60 days prior to year's end. I would warn you and caution all of you that before you sit and make any decisions on these hotels, take a look at their budgets, because most of these folks are taking off the old budgets, dusting them off, doing a 10 or 20% discount on yearly revenues and expenses. And I can tell you that it's going to be a tough year next year. Could be tougher than this year because the PPP money and the reserve money is going to be gone. And until we get a vaccine, fear of travel is still going to be there, still going to be lingering and hanging over us. And that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. And apologize for the little initial challenge we had visually up front. And at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Jim.
That's what Jack does, the deep dive on the business side. He is the bullshit barometer for all of the optimism of the borrowers when they come in and think that the world is all going to be great starting in October or January or March or whatever it is. Maybe it will, or maybe it needs some other factors. And the kinds of considerations that study shows will probably leave you as an asset manager looking at what should we be doing for the intermediate and longer term here. Is this time to just extend again, or is there something else we ought to be going for? So when you do your comprehensive situation analysis, you've gotten the business input, the economic input, you've looked at your documents, you know where your holes are and what you want to do, and you're certainly considering things like, can you get a pay down or do you give an extension? And your options are really listed here. I mean, everything from do nothing to try to seek a bankruptcy and all of these things in between. But what I'm going to focus on this afternoon is leaving the borrower in place and doing a loan mod or workout. I'm also going to suggest we've got some great materials on helping you on the comprehensive situation analysis, what alternate strategies are, looking at these things and the various considerations for every party. It's all available for free at hotellawyer.com. And there's a tab called Resource Center. It's all under there. So we're going to be looking only at workouts and loan mods, but going beyond the normal loan extensions, deferrals, and pay downs. And the first thing that raises, particularly when you look at some of the kinds of analysis you get on the business side, is what can I do as a lender without exerting that so-called forbidden control, the control that gives you lender liability, that makes you a mortgagee in possession, that subordinates your loan, the Armageddon of all things. You don't want to exert the bad control. Well, there are some limits. We're going to talk about those, but I hope I will open your eyes to some things you may not have looked at. And these are obviously very distinct from situations where either a receiver has been appointed and has taken possession of the property, and you're able to deal with the receiver pretty much at arm's length. It's going to be court approved, and yeah, receivers like to work with lenders, but it's got to be on the up and up, and lender liability is, unless you really stumble or do something silly, you're not going to get exposed there. And similarly, once you've foreclosed and taken over the property and you're in possession, You can do anything you want to. You're the owner, so you can make all these changes. But how about the situation where you've left the borrower in place and there's some reason? Maybe the borrower has great connections with the local government on some kind of entitlements you need, or licenses or permits, or connections on some kind of business, or various reasons you may want to leave the borrower in place. Well, the classic rule is here that a lender can't control the borrower. A lender is a lender. The lender can declare a default, foreclose, and take position, but before it does that, it can't tell the borrower how to run its business, right? That's Workouts 101. But here's the big exception that is incredibly important. In the context of a loan modification or workout, the lender can condition any of its concessions, from forbearance, additional cash advances, whatever concessions there may be, upon various things that are requested from the borrower, and done properly, they will not constitute that control. They will not give rise to a lender liability. So look at the kinds of things that Jack was talking about. Staffing levels. Maybe they're too high. A lot of executive folks sitting around collecting money. You don't need that. And maybe they don't have the right controller or financial controls or marketing. Maybe they've got 100 acres they've been holding for another development, and that could be sold. There are various changes that you might think that if you owned this property, boy, you'd like to see those things happen. But you're a little concerned, what do I do as a lender? And what I'm going to suggest is that there are ways for a lender to accomplish its goals without incurring lender liability. The starting point for this is it takes a cooperative and motivated borrower. Now, that may be a personal guarantee. It may be the love of the property. It may be the desire to do the right thing. It may be that you are willing to let the borrower take a salary or, wham, walk around money during the execution of a plan. But with the cooperative borrower, that you then can get significant changes, but you have to kind of do it through a process, the workout process, in little micro bites where you take steps and the borrower requests and gets these concessions. And if you don't have that, then you've got your other alternatives, the receiverships, foreclosures, bankruptcy, or throwing in the towel. So how do you do this? The lender can't say it wants any one of those things. You're not going to say reduce staffing, sell this asset, give us a new marketing plan. You're going to ask the borrower. You can ask the borrower for any kind of information. You already get, presumably, certain financial reports and information. Well, you can enhance those. Some of those things that Jack was talking about that you aren't getting, maybe you want those on a regular basis. But you can also get more. You can get proposals. You can get a business plan, something that's going to get you to an end result. How do you get to 6 months? How do you get to next June? Or how do you get 36 months out? And what are those areas of concern? So you're not saying cut staffing. You're saying we're very concerned about the staffing costs. We're very concerned about the marketing doesn't seem to be strong. And rather than your telling them what to do and how to do it, which would give you lender liability, you can't, the classic case, the banks literally sent an officer into the borrower offices, and the bank officer told them which bills to pay and negotiated contract, took over like he was running the business. Can't do that. But instead, you suggest that you require that if they want that forbearance, if they want cash advances, if they want whatever concessions you're going to give, that they get professional advice. They hire a lender-approved advisor or consultant that will prepare an analysis, make a proposal, and an executable, actionable plan to shore up the weaknesses and solve the problems. And maybe those are things like, looking at the alternatives of mothballing the hotel, or a friendly bankruptcy, or a sale of assets, or the best brand or best operator. So the basic message here is that properly organized and scripted, and with a cooperative borrower, most lender objectives of the sort we've talked about, major objectives of repositioning or restructuring or changes at that property, can be accomplished. So I'm going to stop for just a moment. Meryl, do you see any questions for me before I go into my case study here? I'm not seeing any questions.
No, I don't see any.
Okay. Similarly, if you have questions on what I've covered, I'm now going to kind of give you how this really works in reality, and give you an example. So this was a few years ago. This was one of the largest home builders in the country, national home builder. The lender we represented had about $1.5 billion in credit. There were actually several other major lenders who had comparable debt with this party. Many offices around the country. This was a multi-generational business where for years they had attracted some of the most competent, expert executives in the industry, and they were the best of the best. But given the economic situation, it was a lot of very expensive people not able to really do much in that context. They also had a strategy of land banking. So they bought land and held it for 10, 20, 30 years before it would really be ripe for development. They, when the market turned down and sales dropped off, they doubled down, they increased their efforts, they had more sales, they increased the marketing, and it was like spitting into the wind. Very bad results. So fast cash burn, and they really needed a whole different approach. The lender wanted this borrower because they were so well connected. They knew these extraordinarily complex assets. They had great relationships. They probably had the ability to raise additional capital, but they had to get this borrower turned around from we're going to fight into the headwinds no matter what, into basically a preparing for the nuclear winter, selling off unnecessary assets, mothballing everything, and figuring out how to raise additional capital. And of course, one way, if they'd gone in and said, do those things, and were running the business, they would be liable to all kinds of folks. But they were able to accomplish it another way. They knew not to tell the borrower directly. So this is what actually happened. You start obviously with the default. You get the pre-negotiation agreement started. So all your basic Workout 101. You also make clear that all of your discussions are settlement discussions pursuant to that pre-workout, pre-negotiation, pre-workout agreement. So anything said, used, or presented can't be used against the party. So you're taking away the ammunition for the lender liability. You start with a meeting. And the first one's probably something of a psychotherapy session in which the borrower explains the joys and hopes and what they want to accomplish, and the lender gives a bit of a reality check, and there's a discussion really of need for some neutral input and expertise and satisfying some basic concerns that are going to involve hiring of a third-party expert. In this case, I think they ended up hiring Price Waterhouse, which had a great sort of bankruptcy workout, real estate workout group, one of the most respected in the country. The bank said you can hire anybody you want, we'll have to approve them, and the borrower intelligently came back and said, well, can you give us 2 or 3 on your short list, which the lender was happy to do. You don't want to give them one or you're back in the control soup. So over this is a short period, but over a period of meetings, there was an agreement on who the advisor would be. That was number one. On the terms of engagement for the advisor, part of it is this is not an attorney. There's no attorney-client privilege. So there's no problem in that information being given directly to the lender and letting the lender be proactive and interactive as they are defining the problems and defining the solutions and figuring out where to go and looking at how long they have to do it with and what are the available capital sources and all this stuff. And that agreement gets approved. The process gets approved. There are milestones. So they will produce the report in 2 weeks or whatever, the preliminary report. And that'll be reviewed and essentially through that process, the experts were able to say, you need to get ready for a nuclear winter. You need to slash down to a skeleton staff. You need to sell everything that isn't essential to get through. Get rid of all the staff except for the executives who are going to run the program, sell off those land banks, and effectively do what the lender wants. But this is the borrower, the borrower's advisor, lender approved, presenting a plan and asking for the specific concessions that they needed from the lender, which in this case actually had to result with the lender making cash advances. The lender ended up advancing enough cash to pay for the advisory services because the borrower probably wouldn't have made it. They were really out of powder by that point, and getting them through the staffing for essentially cutting down the situation. So I gave that example because it is probably one of the largest and most complex with the deepest and most profound changes in the business of the borrower. But it's the same with a hotel. So you get your detailed analysis. You get that report that Jack has provided. You work on the asset management side. You take a reality check. When do things come back? What are we going to do? Do we want to step in? Do we want them to be there? Are we better off with a sale? What do we need first? And whether it is getting a sale effectuated by a borrower, that's something you could encourage them to do, to explore a sale, and whether that maximizes the value at this time or whether a friendly bankruptcy does it or whatever else may do it. But you go through step by step with the borrower and advisor, proposals, and working through the concessions that are needed. So at the end of the day, while you can't tell the borrower what to do, through the right set of questions and carrots and sticks, you can probably get to a very similar place if properly and carefully orchestrated. And why are you doing this? You're doing it to maximize your asset value. Citus probably has some of the largest, most complex assets in these large single asset pools. You've got some very aggressive certificate holders who want to be very proactive, and there is a way to be aggressive and to be proactive, but to also be careful so that you don't end up subordinating your situation. So look at, with the new cash flows, with the new reality, what you need to do. You may be able to terminate 50-year Four Seasons management agreements or 20-year Hyatt agreements. We've added $40 million, $50 million, $100 million to assets just by terminating a long-term no-cut management agreement, or getting new operators, or getting other things done by the owner of the property. So what do you need to do? Where do you need to go? Figure it out, and then we put together a blueprint that can be executed with milestones. So these are the steps we went through in the case study. These are the steps you do here. And it's important to get this right at the beginning, as Jack said. There are a lot of options that you have. And if you start off on the wrong path or the wrong road, as the slide says, sometimes it's you can't go back. So, Kurt, are you there? We covered the basics that you were hoping for today.
Yeah, that was great. Hey, you know, you touched on one thing that may come up next year, mothballing, you know, as we have these urban large hotels attached to convention centers. I mean, that analysis might have to be made. And I'm wondering, Jim, Jack,
Yeah.
how do you look at that? How does that analysis go for you? And what have you experienced with it? Does it ever pay off, or can you
Well,
ever make, lemonade out of lemons with that?
we've done a few of those this year ourselves on large assets. One of them, an 800-room hotel at an airport, 55,000 square feet of meeting space. We ran the analysis and skinning down skeleton staff, staying open on that particular asset, eliminated all the food and beverage but grab and go. It was once we got to 40% occupancy, the delta was $30,000 a month. The reason is still have insurance, you still had union health benefits to pay. I've got a checklist that I'd be happy to send you, Kurt, that's got like 41 items on it that we use when we go through that. I can tell you on smaller, nimble hotels, 150 room, 170 room boutique hotel, the numbers look better at closing than they would the other way, look better at keeping open than some of the other ones. But I've got a checklist.
But it's case by case. If you've got negative cash flow, if the borrower can't or won't put money in, if the lender doesn't want to do any advances, unless there is a way to essentially get a recapitalization, you may have no option. So this is case by case. There are crossover points at which it makes more sense to, you don't have money, you don't want personal liability for payroll, which you have people working and don't get paid. The people involved in doing that have personal liability. Even the principals, the check signer type people involved in it. So you may have no option. And while there is a general rule that a hotel loses half its value when it closes down, just because there's going to be startup costs and it's not a going concern anymore and you lose the employees and all that stuff, it is a case-by-case analysis. And with the many hotels operating at such a low level now, you need to really figure out with fine-tuning where that crossover happens. And that is the magic that Jack does under alternate scenarios to test. Is it a mothball? Is it a close? Is it a cut back? Do we just close off a couple floors? What do we do?
Even the smallest hotel, I say smallest select service and up, probably pays heat, light, power, insurance, property tax, and the host of other union things at the union that you have to take care of. About $240,000. That's my rule of thumb. As Jim said, it changes case to case. On the bigger one, that 800-room hotel was about $770,000 a month that you would have to pay, including property tax. The ultimate goal is, can you pay debt service? How do you pay debt service? And how do you make that debt service whole in order to move forward? As I said in my presentation, I think next year is going to be a lot more challenging because all of the PPP money and all of the reserve money is going to be gone. And if a hotel stays open, it's going to be based on generating their own cash and bringing enough money to the bottom line to pay the bills. I'll send you that checklist if you'd like.
All right. Thanks, Jack. Very helpful.
Hopefully we didn't put you all to sleep. It was a great honor and a privilege to address such a learned group. We've had a chance to work with some of you before in the past. Hopefully we will in the future. Again, I've also got a reopening checklist. I'd be happy to send Kurt. It's got 12 pages of every item you need to do when so you've closed the hotel. Here's what you need to do when you reopen it again. And a lot of those come with a cost added to it of incremental cost of retraining the staff and all of that. There's a lot going on now that old rules didn't apply to. There's also an awful lot that does. All of the new cleaning and sanitizing and everything adds about 20% your costs from the rooms department. But then again, looking at it, you've got a much skinnier staff now. And the key is how do we, I've heard many special servicers, and I think, Kurt, you and Tim mentioning that you want to come out of this, you'd like your borrowers to come out of this better than a lot of borrowers came out of it last downturn. And that's a really good thing. I think there's some best practices that are in place now running skinny hotels, that if we can keep those in place, hold the unions at bay to some degree, that we're going to be able to run far better hotels efficiently, more cost effectively in the future, and buy stock in the virus company. I don't know what else to say.
Kurt, my thought is that we provide you and the attendees with the slides from today. Would you like us to provide you with some of these supplemental materials in case your team wants it? I don't want to bury you guys in.
Yeah, I think when you provide the slides, if you can provide the checklist too, that'd be very helpful, and certainly all of your contact information.
Okay, great.
Yeah, just one quick question.
Okay.
Hi, this is Greg Callanan. I think checklists would be really helpful. I was wondering if you also have some, almost like a checklist for various hotel types, maybe some ratios that we should be looking at, just something that as we, an asset manager, when they're initially, I guess, looking through either budgets or anything else the borrower is providing, that they could kind of say, okay, to your earlier point, maybe, the staffing expense is way too high or something looks off, something that they could just generally at least look and say, okay, there might be a problem here, here, and here.
Sure, I can put something together. I normally rely on almost 40 years experience.
Oh yeah, no, I'm sure you don't need any. I mean, because you have 40 years experience in your head, that's incredible. But hospitality is such a unique property type. I think a lot of people might find it useful if it's like a, 1-page, 2-page sheet with basically bullet points to say, like, look, is this a limited service hotel?
Sure.
Here are some ranges. Think about X, Y, and Z. And I think that would be a good thing to have.
I'd be happy to do that. I can put a little matrix together.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, everyone. Do check out hotellawyer.com, the resource center. There's a great handbook called the Lender's Handbook for Troubled Hotels that really is a very practical item with a lot of checklists in it. And we do have a number of materials up there that are very practical, nitty-gritty resources for you. So invite you to use those and think of us when you do.
All right, great. All right. Thanks
Thank
again,
you so
guys.
much.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you
Bye,
all.
everyone.
Bye-bye.